everybody. Welcome back to another episode here on the Raspy Dispatch, our segment, Let's Talk Dispatch. Hope everyone's doing good, living their best life, and your mandated overtime is a zero. I'm very excited to be chatting with today's guest. If you're in the dispatch world, I'm sure you've seen his face, know his name. Ryan is an outreach director and instructor with 911 Training Institute, and I'm going to bring him in. Hey, Ryan.
Hello, Ashley.
How's it going?
Oh, I am better than I deserve, ma'am. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. Just got through the holiday weekend. This wonderful 4th of July, dispatcher's favorite holiday.
Yes,
How was your holiday?
I barely survived, bunkered down in my doomsday, safe room inside my house.
So lots of fireworks in your area, then, huh?
Yeah, lots of lots of fireworks in my area. But yeah, it's all good. Thankful
Awesome.
not to be a dispatcher working on July 4th anymore. I can't tell you that. So
Isn't that the truth? You know, I just
yes.
switched to from a larger agency to a smaller one. So it was my first time just not being like slammed on 4th of July. Like I came into the weekend like ready and I was just like, oh, this is nice. This works for me. I can do this.
Yeah, I remember like pages and pages and pages of calls just holding. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
100+ calls for service holding, and all of them
Yeah.
just like fireworks, 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 fireworks.
Yeah, seriously, it's
Ugh.
crazy. 4th of July is not the business if you're a dispatcher. Well, if you're a
No,
working
it is
dispatcher,
not.
that's for sure.
No, it is not. Hey, so can I tell you how excited I am to be here with you? Because I
Please.
have trolled your social media for a while now. And normally, right, I just see, like everybody else, I just see your talking head on my computer monitor. You don't
Uh-huh.
talk back to me. And now you're like, we're engaged in conversation. So this is super exciting.
Oh my gosh, thank you so much. Yeah, no, I've been like reaching out to folks, and when I was like making my list, my wish list of people to talk to out here in this community, you were definitely one of the first folks that I thought of, wrote down, and was like, I gotta talk to this guy. I gotta get some one-on-one time with them to talk about dispatch. So thanks for being willing to
Oh,
look at my face virtually.
it's, yeah, it's my pleasure. It's my pleasure.
So, what is your story with dispatch? Like, how long you been doing this? How'd you get into it? Tell me everything.
That is the most complex opening question ever because my path through 911 is all over the place.
Mhm.
so so like a lot of people, I didn't want to be a dispatcher. I wanted to be a cop. So
Mhm.
I was interested in law enforcement, and I thought that's what I wanted to do with my life. So I was pursuing that career. I started working at the Anaheim Police Department in Anaheim, California in 2002. So I'm your Southern California neighbor.
Hello.
Hello. So I started as a college intern, and upon completion of my internship, the department hired me to be a police cadet, which is like a step under police officer. And I got to do a lot of cool assignments as a police cadet. I worked in our front lobby, writing police reports, and then I went to a family crimes, sex crimes, robbery, homicide. So I got to do some awesome stuff. And then I ended in dispatch before I got promoted to be a dispatcher. And like I kind of thought it would just be like the next rung on the ladder, if you will. Because at that time, in this would have been like, I think 2003, 2004 then. The state of California was in a statewide, quote unquote, budget crisis. And like government agencies were not hiring. Like everything was frozen for like a year plus. And so I thought, well, no one's hiring police officers right now, but I have the opportunity to be a dispatcher. Like, okay, it makes sense. It'll make me more well-rounded. It'll give me more experience. And so like I went to dispatch, And then I did that for like 8 months. And then I left the city of Anaheim to go to another neighboring agency here in Orange County, where I live. And I went to be a police officer at that agency, and that lasted about 5 minutes. I was almost done with FTO. I was probably like 3/4 of the way or more done with FTO, getting ready for my ghost phase, if you will. And I was like, you know what? This is not like I was struggling with some things, and I was not enjoying it. And it was just not for me. And after getting into a couple of like physical fights, I was like, man, I can't see myself doing this for 20 years of my life.
Yeah.
And so like I gracefully bowed out of that agency. And then the next day, Anaheim called and said, hey, will you come back and be one of our dispatchers because we're so short-staffed right now? And I said, yeah, sure, I'll come back and be a dispatcher. It'll be one of those things I do in the meantime until I figure out what I want to be when I grow up, since plan A didn't work out, right?
Yeah.
So I went back, and I thought it would, I would just be doing it for a little while, and in the blink of an eye, like I think another 9 years almost went by. So altogether, I worked in local law enforcement in Southern California for almost 12 years. And then I retired in 2013. And when I retired, I went to work for the 911 Wellness Foundation, which at the time was a nonprofit organization made up of a lot of different stakeholders in the 911 industry who came together to work on things associated to mental health, emotional health, things like stress, resilience, and wellness. And I fell in love with that stuff because when I was a dispatcher, I didn't get a lot of training related to stress management, stress resilience when I was a dispatcher. So I went through a police academy of 6 months. I went through a recertification academy of 3 weeks. Then I went through a dispatch academy of 3 weeks. And in all that 1,000+ hours of law enforcement training, the amount of training I got related to like stress management, critical incidents was minimal. And so, and this was in the early 2000s, right? So much has changed in the state of California since then. But so when I quit being a dispatcher and I learned about, people are offering like dispatcher wellness classes. What is that? How can I be a part of that? Because that's what I want to give back to dispatchers so that they don't experience some of the things that I did in my career. And and then I started working at a local police academy here and became a certified instructor in the state of California. So I started teaching law enforcement training classes, primarily towards 911 since that's my background. But I have a strong education in psychology. So I got roped into doing a crisis intervention team training, and I coordinated a county-wide training program for law enforcement, which included 911 here in Orange County for 6 years. And then that came to an end, I don't know, a couple of years ago, COVID.
Hashtag.
Yeah. And now I've worked for the 911 Training Institute, which is founded by Jim Marshall. And we're a small private consulting firm that offers various types of training and consulting services to dispatchers and EMS professionals. And a lot of what we offer is geared specifically towards mental health. That is our bread and butter. So whether that is the mental health for the dispatcher, or if it's giving the dispatcher tools to help callers experiencing a mental health crisis, that is our area of speciality. And then we also do some other things related to that, like peer support and leadership. So there you go. There is my journey through 911.
Awesome. No, so it's funny, like one of the great things I think about dispatch is it does create an opportunity for folks who want to be in the field helping in some way, but not necessarily getting into physical fights and, like being in the field in that way as an officer. Like I as well thought I would go patrol for a very long time. It's like I got my undergrad in criminal justice, my master's in criminal justice. So I always knew that I was going in that way, in that direction. Ever since I was younger, I was weird that way. And so,
And you were an
uh,
athlete too, right?
yeah, so I was super lucky to, I went to a junior college, played basketball there, was able to get a scholarship to a
Ballin'.
4 year NAIA school. So I was able to get my undergrad at very low cost, pretty much just my 2 years at the junior college level, I had to pay for myself. The rest was paid for by getting that scholarship, which allowed me to go get my master's degree, rather quickly after graduating, still in criminal justice. And one of the big things and reasons that I kind of started this whole shindig here, the Raspy Dispatcher, was I got all that education and we didn't talk about dispatch in it, and it's so important that it's such a vital part of emergency response services, but it's also such a big career option for those who want to help but not necessarily get their hands in it the way our officers, our firefighters, or our EMS folks do.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Act
Mhm.
and pause real quick. Where did you do your undergrad at?
Waldorf College in Forest City, Iowa.
Oh, so small.
Yeah,
Tiny.
tiny,
Tiny.
tiny.
I
It's such a
so
fun experience.
I did my undergrad at an NAIA school as well.
Yes.
So, oh, good old NAIA.
You
Um,
gotta love it.
you gotta love it. You know what? You're absolutely right. And there's such a strong dichotomy of two groups, and I think it's people who say you can use 911. I think kind of like we had originally imagined as like in preparation of achieving other career goals. But then there's the polar opposite, and there's the group that says no, 911 is a calling, and we want people who want to enter this field who are going to make a career of it, right? Don't give us your 2 years because this is a stepping stone to something else.
Yeah.
And I think I kind of lean more towards it's okay if people are using it in preparation of achieving something else. And that's just my personal opinion. It's just while you're here, we want the best from you, right? And we expect that you give us the best of you while you're here. So as long as you're doing that, if we can help you achieve other career goals in life, and whether that be public safety or not, there's plenty of other people who leave 911 and go to the private sector, and we don't fault them. We say, great, you're taking your dispatcher experience, and now you've gone to the private sector and you're working for a CAD company, a CAD vendor, or computers or radios or some other tech company. So you're utilizing that 911 experience in the private sector, but we frown upon people who want to become like field responders. And I get the argument. It's just I think maybe it's because I'm biased, right? Because I was one of those people who was trying to use it to gain more experience so that I knew what was happening on that side of the radio. Because as a cadet, I knew what was going on out there. I was doing plenty of ride-alongs all the time and doing other stuff as a cadet and all of this stuff. But I knew very little what happened in the communications center until I became a dispatcher. And that gave me the full spectrum of everything that went on over the radio, from the start of a phone call to, the ending disposition. It was like, okay, this gives me a more comprehensive picture now. And whether I become a field responder or a dispatcher or take that somewhere else, like that experience was invaluable to my journey through public safety. So I think you're right. And it's little podcasts like this and YouTube channels and training videos that you make that I think are bringing more enlightenment to people to do some more introspective examination to try and figure out, well, hey, maybe being a dispatcher is a career for me, because I had never considered it before, because in all transparency, we do a pretty poor job of marketing ourselves.
Facts.
So
Yeah.
Facts. So yeah, it's people like you who are bringing that to light to the average day Joe and Sally sitting at home trying to figure out whether or not now this is a career path for them.
Yeah, and I mean, speaking of folks who are like using dispatch as a stepping stone to get their foot into a department and then move into the field, like I'm all for that, because if you do this job as a dispatcher, you're gonna have more respect for it. And there's definitely a disconnect between our units and dispatch, and that's both ways. We could better understand what they're dealing with out there. They can better understand what we're dealing with it here, especially smaller agencies. I went from a big agency where I had 10 people with me answering 911 and then a whole other side doing the radio. And now I'm in a small agency where if we're lucky, there's three, you know. Yeah, so it's totally different. So when we get something coming in and it's hot and the officers, everyone's going to it, there's only me and more than likely one other person. And we're both answering the phones. We're both doing the radio. We're both. So officers understanding that in the field, like, got to give a little grace, because while you're asking questions, I'm still on the phone with the person who's in it. I'm fielding calls from other people watching the person in it and still trying to get you all that safety information while you're driving there. So when we have that understanding of the job's difficult both ways, just the reality of what it is, we're going to have a better relationship with each other and not get us frustrated, both ways.
Yeah, and the agency where I worked, like a lot of other agencies, utilized some of those field responders to fill staffing shortages. And so when they would come in and try to do call taking and type things into CAD, the best people to do that were the cops who were former dispatchers. And we loved them because when they're out on patrol, their radio etiquette, their radio discipline, their use of the MDT and CAD, and doing some searches themselves for criminal history and contacts and all of that, those people were the best because they knew everything else that dispatch was doing. And it's not to fault or say that all the other officers were wrong. It just made the job of a dispatcher so much easier.
Yeah.
But you are absolutely right, because even as dispatchers, how many of us really know what's going on that end of the radio? And a lot of dispatchers are quick to sit in their chair of judgment and say, hey, why is he asking me for this? Why is he doing this? Doesn't he know? And it's like, yeah, he does, but you should also know what he's doing right now. And if you had a better idea of what he was doing, right, there would be a mutual understanding and appreciation, so that when stuff does hit the fan, right, everybody works. There's that cohesiveness as a team that comes together, instead of feeling like the that we sometimes experience.
Yeah, no, seriously. I mean, it can definitely be challenging, new officers, new dispatchers, like everyone trying to find, because everyone wants to do well. Like, there's nobody out there who just wants to make you like make you ask them to keep repeating because their radio traffic is terrible. Like, there's no officer out there who wants to repeat themselves 6 times because they can't get it across to you. Like, everyone wants to do well. I don't want to have to ask you to repeat because I'm not catching it so many times. Like, we all have the same goal, which is, to get you the information as quickly as possible, to get help where it needs to go as quickly as possible. And just understanding that we know it's hard both ways. It's a tough gig.
Yeah, and that's, I encourage dispatchers to do ride-alongs as often as they're able, just like we encourage our field responders to come in and do sit-alongs as often as they are able. And whether or not a dispatcher chooses to use that to take them a different path in their career, I say all the more for it. Congratulations. Thank you for your 2 years of service as a dispatcher. As long as, like I said, those 2 years was the best that you can give us at the time. And hopefully, as a dispatch center, we've helped prepare that person for the next step in their career, wherever that may lead them.
And even more so, hopefully, they're just gonna go patrol, and then they're gonna reduce our shortages on that side.
Yes.
We're short on both ends, so if just stay with us, go over there. Happy to talk to you on the other end of the radio,
Exactly. And they're going to come back and work OT and dispatch anyway. So
exactly. We're not going to say no. We always got a seat available. Isn't that the truth? Oh man.
Okay, so you work 3 dispatchers at a time. How many patrol officers do you have on at a time?
Probably with swings. While swings is still on, we probably have a good 15 on a good day.
And how does that compare then to the large agency where you started?
Just night and day different. It's so in SAC we had 6 districts, so we could break down. Wait, do we have 6? Yeah, so we could break down usually to 4 channels, and we would keep downtown together with another close district, and each of those districts would have probably 10, 15 officers on. There I didn't know my officers. I knew their call signs, and I knew their work ethic. So if I knew your call sign, and it would match whatever work ethic you had consistently. I'd be like, that person don't be doing this. That person, they do. I could send this without having to worry about any feedback. That's the relationship I had with my officers out there, because it's just such a large agency. I would imagine a lot of our officers didn't know our other officers, just because if they're not out of the same station, they're not seeing these guys unless they're going to a call with them. So that coming to the small agency, I know all of my units, really. I mean, I get to see them, they come up, I get to know them, and I didn't have that at my last agency, which is really nice, honestly, to have a more personal relationship.
Yeah, but I think starting at a larger agency is easier to adjust then, rather than starting at a small agency.
Agreed.
and then trying to go big, because that
Agreed.
will just blow your mind.
Yeah, no, 1,000%, because when I switched to my smaller agency, I had a few things going my way. One, they use the same system as us. Our CAD
system. Okay.
Yeah. So I didn't have to learn
Lucky.
a lot of the keys and stuff. But in my big agency, we didn't run out anybody. We only ran plates and driver's license, but we had a warrants channel for all the other stuff. So when I got to my smaller agency, I had to learn how to run, we call them K9s. Yeah. And I was like, oh, this is terrible.
Yeah. Yes.
This is horrible. I know SAC will take me back if I don't get through this. We're sure but I had a lot of imposter syndrome going through my lateral training, because I was like, I had to learn this big. Luckily, I didn't have to learn the system, but I had to learn this big way of reading this essentially other language on these NCIC hits and this stuff, and getting through it quickly, because so that was challenge. That was the most challenging part for me.
So then at the large agency, were you having to do teletype entries, or did you have a records division do that for you?
We had a records division that did most of our things. We did very minimal stuff. And if anything needed to go out right then, the supervisor would probably be taking care of it, because we were getting slammed with calls still.
Yeah, same here. As a dispatcher, Anaheim was big enough and busy enough that we didn't have to do any of that. I guess teletype entry, which would be entering different types of records into computer systems and whatnot. Mm-hmm. So I got kind of spoiled, because then when I went to a smaller agency, even though I was on the patrol side, the smaller agency dispatch had to do everything. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, oh man, so that missing person report that I just took, you're going to have to spend the next 40 minutes entering all of that into, a California statewide computer system. I'm like, yeah, no, thank you.
Yeah, my mind like literally was blown because when they told me that I had to run these, reports and stuff like that, I was just like, I never knew who my officers were out with at my last station because they would jump to the warrants channel and then jump back to me like, can I get a second for a search? Like, okay, second for a search. Like it was such a disconnect with why they need that, like how they got that information. Like I knew we had a warrants channel, but I didn't fully understand what that person on the warrants channel was doing because they didn't teach us because we didn't do it, like
right.
or even our records department, like all the stuff they're entering. It's like a different type of busy. It's like I'm not getting slammed with calls, but I have a lot of other side duties that I'm doing at this agency compared to my last.
Right. I got 20 stolen vehicles to enter into a computer system now. But like, so, and doesn't that bring up an interesting point too? Because like, that's kind of almost like a little offshoot, if you will, of another career opportunity available in public safety that a lot of people kind of overlook just because they think that, well, it's not really dispatch related. And it's like, okay, well, technically it's not, but like neither is IT. But if computers and radios are your bag, then certainly you want to look for like an IT position that would support a communication center, even though you're not a dispatcher answering 911 calls. So like there's a lot of creative things that people can do that are in public safety and kind of dispatch related, but even not dispatch.
No, it's so true. Even at my last agency, we had an IT guy in-house at our comm center in case anything went wrong. We didn't, during the day, went over there and we're, pulled him out and was like, yeah, come fix this, So it's so true that there's so many tangents that you can jump on and branch off into from dispatch. One of my academy, I want to say professor, but I know that's not the right word, but one of my teachers, they always said like, look, once you're a dispatcher, you have such a unique skill set when it comes to multitasking, your ability to problem solve, customer service, like you can go get a job anywhere. You really can. And there's so much after dispatch. And I think that's something I'm discovering talking to all these people, talking to you. I just met with Cassie, First Responder Wellness. Their interview is going to go out on the 6th. And there's life after dispatch. And I think that's important too. You don't have to put in 50 years as a dispatcher. There's other things we can branch out and still get that same validation and feeling from the work we're doing outside of answering 911 calls.
Exactly. And okay, first of all, I'm a little mad at you because you had Cassie on your show before me. Okay, but Cassie's my bestie, so I'm gonna let it slide. But I don't know if you follow anything that my dear friend Tracy Eldridge does. Tracy Eldridge is big in the 911 industry, and she talks a lot about helping people find that life after dispatch, because a lot of people suffer from, I want to call it like a professional identity crisis. And we know that field responders, cops, firefighters, EMTs definitely suffer from this. But I think more is coming to light in the dispatch world, because when a dispatcher gets done, whether it be voluntarily through a resignation or through retirement, or even involuntarily through termination, trying to figure out what to do afterwards is incredibly challenging. And Tracy Eldridge offers a lot of insight, specifically related to her journey through the aftermath she experienced in her career and leaving as a manager, as a director. So, if your followers are looking for another great conversation like this to have, I would recommend looking up Tracy Eldridge and
Definitely.
checking out some of the conversations she's had about trying to help people navigate that professional challenge of, okay, right, like I hung up the headset, cliche and all, but like now what? And I know I really struggled with that, because when I was a dispatcher, all of my friends in my personal life knew me as like Dispatcher Ryan.
Mm.
And in Orange County, there's, a lot of different agencies, but the 911 world in Orange County is relatively small. And so when I would call other agencies, they knew me as like, oh, Ryan from Anaheim.
Mm.
And then leaving that, trying to figure out afterwards, like, okay, like who am I? Because for so long, that is how I have identified myself, because I poured so much of my time and energy in life into creating this professional persona that when I didn't have that anymore, I didn't know what to do.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I compare it to being an athlete. I compare it to what
Yes.
athletes get on their last, you spent, if whether your last game is in high school, whether it's in college, whether you make it, it's
Yes.
it's that. It's like I no longer have this thing that has filled up so much of my life. Now what do I do? In the athlete world now, at least, they can get paid while they're in college for their likeness and stuff. So there's a new career point for them. But for athletes for so long who weren't going professional, not making any money, people making money off them, it's like, no longer, now I don't have that to sell anymore. I don't
Right.
have that outlet. Now what? That's
Right.
definitely what I compare it to, in this field. And whether you're in patrol or if you're in dispatch, it's definitely that fear of missing out, that identity crisis. Like I'm no longer a part of the club, so now what? It's a totally real thing, and I'm definitely, excuse me, gonna check out Tracy Eldridge's stuff in regards to that, because I think it's super relative.
Yeah, don't worry, I'll introduce you. But
Oh,
that your
wow,
athlete,
there
your
you
there you go.
go.
That your athlete analogy is perfect, because I think
Mhm.
there's so many people who can relate to that. Early in childhood, at one point in your life, you likely participated in some type of team sport.
Mhm.
And so you kind of get that feeling of like, oh, I'm part of a team. I'm part of this feeling of belonging, because we're all working towards the same mission and the same
Mhm.
goal. And then when that dissipates, it's like, okay, after the dust has settled, right, now you're no longer Ashley the baller. You
Mhm.
just Ashley. And like, I'm no
Yeah.
longer Ryan the runner. I'm just Ryan, who's old now.
Right?
We can't
Like I
we
play
can't run
basketball
and we
now,
can't
my
run and we
arm
can't
hurts.
ball. Exactly.
Right? My
We can't
arm
run a
hurts
ball no
now.
more.
When I used to play, that didn't hurt. I didn't realize that was a muscle that was being used so
Exactly.
often, like, my niece and nephew like, let's play. I'm like, let's just play horse. I don't know.
Right.
We need to exert ourselves so much. We can just shoot. I can
Exactly.
still do that.
Exactly. It's a great analogy, though. Nice.
Yeah, it's a total reality. And I think, another thing that I think we're doing, I feel in my experience thus far, um, we're doing a better job as a complete culture, first responders, of acknowledging the PTSD that comes, the burnout, and creating safe spaces for us to acknowledge that, talk about it, and recover from it. I think we're getting much better. Do we need to keep improving? Yes, but I know during my academy they brought in our peer support. They gave us all of the resources my department had for it. Whereas I think in the past, as you kind of mentioned, we didn't talk about that. We didn't have any critical incident debriefs. Like, what was that? We didn't acknowledge that we could learn from how we handled an incident and be better and do better and check in with each other.
Oh, you're speaking my language now.
Here we go.
Yeah. So when I started my public safety career in the early 2000s, like we didn't talk about that at all. I mean, you know, I remember being down in the front leaning rest position doing push-ups all day, and we talked about everything that made up a good police officer, except with how to live with the perception of failure, specifically after exposure to some type of trauma. And that same attitude and mindset carried on into 911 as well. And even though, you know, 911 dispatchers aren't out there rolling around in the mud, the blood, and the beer, hooking and booking, taking people to jail or fighting fires or anything like that, you know, they still experience exposure to significant amounts of trauma, even in a comm center behind a computer, wearing a headset over the phone or over the radio. And we didn't talk about that at all earlier in my career. And I never experienced the full benefit of having a thing like peer support team come to my aid. And so, you know, the reason I'm no longer as a dispatcher is because I lost a friend and colleague at the police department to suicide early in my career, and I didn't deal with it like I should have, and I stuffed it. I stuffed it, and you know, I managed to forge on ahead for, you know, another 10 years or so in my career before it finally caught up with me. Ironically, as a dispatcher, handling suicide calls from the public. And as a result, you know, I voluntarily chose that, hey, I can't do this anymore. And I had to go through, you know, several months of counseling and therapy. And I was diagnosed with PTSD at one point in time. And I'm like, PTSD as a dispatcher, like, ain't no such thing. I'm like, PTSD, like I didn't just get back from Afghanistan, right?
Yeah.
You know, my Humvee didn't just get blown up by an IED or anything like that. I'm like, that's PTSD, not doing what I did as a dispatcher. And nothing could be farther from the truth. And so educating dispatchers about all of that, things like burnout, compassion fatigue, vicarious trauma, secondary traumatic stress, post-traumatic stress, educating them about those things, and then giving them the tools that they need to help address those things is what's going to help save their career. And let's face it. Okay, when we talk about staffing challenges, that's one of the reasons why is because most dispatchers experience feelings of complete burnout by year 5. I'm like, by year 5. It's no shock then that the 911 world can be such a revolving door, because people get so burned out that they then pursue other career paths and opportunities. And we wonder why we struggle with staffing. Well, I mean, that's one of the reasons, because long before in the past, I think nationwide, we've done a pretty poor job in the past about giving dispatchers the tools to address these things, because we told them that, that this is a tough job. You knew about all of this when you signed up to do this. So like, sit back down and suck it up, Buttercup, because like there's 20 other 911 lines that are ringing right now, right?
Yeah, no, really. And one of the things that I advocate for is using your time. You know, I think a lot of times we can feel guilty about calling in sick because we know it's going to force somebody else in, you know, not using our PTO, whatever it looks like for your department. But it's there for us to use. And sometimes we need a mental health day, you know, and we need to, you know, step aside and give ourselves time for that self-care. And me personally, and I know I've said this before, no one else, not everyone's going to feel this way, but I'm never going to be upset about being forced to come in or stay because my partner, my coworker, my teammate needs a day, whether they're sick, like physically, they throw it up, snot everywhere, or they're mentally, they need a break, you know, like either way, I get both. And use your time, call out, because then you're gonna be here for me longer than just that one day. You know what I mean? If we really practice that self-care and use our time correctly, our career is going to be much longer than 5 years, you know?
Right. Yeah, so long as your coworkers aren't abusing it, right? That's all we care
Exactly.
about.
That's the
So
key. That's the key.
you make a lot of cool videos to try and help people who are like starting their
Mm-hmm.
career at the very beginning.
Yes.
So what is your favorite way to bring all of this to light to them, like without scaring them off?
I think that the best thing to do when considering this line of work is have a real understanding of the challenges that it holds, whether that's staffing. I think the biggest two challenges is staffing and trauma. If I were to just go off the top of my head, those are the biggest challenges because the job is fun, right? Like working the hot call, helping someone through a big time tragedy. Like those things are fun in the sense that that's the job. That's when you're shining. That's when you're, that's game point, 5 seconds on the clock, you're shooting, it goes in. That's the rush of being a 911 dispatcher, I'm all the
All these
sport
sports
metaphors today.
analogies. I love it.
I mean, it's working today. It's working. I'm feeling it. Maybe I'll go play basketball after this. I don't know. But the two things you do have to realize, you have to acknowledge, is that staffing could be terrible at the department you're going into. So you got to be willing to go through that with your agency, or you're going to end up hating it. You're going to hate the job, the department, and it's going to be a struggle. So acknowledging that, and if that's a good fit for you in your personal life. And then the trauma, you will be touched by this job in that way. It's going to look different for everybody, what calls affect them, but knowing that going in and having the tools, as you mentioned, is one of my favorite word, is another analogy, having your tool belt
Mm-hmm.
prepared for that, because it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And really be knowledgeable enough about yourself to recognize your red flags, your
Right.
burnout flags, so you can prevent a larger episode, and again create a longer career because you're managing that trauma that you're gonna get.
I love talking to either people who are interested in 911 or people who just got hired, because uh, they're they're new, so they have not yet embraced that attitude and mindset of that suck it up emotional code, right?
Yeah.
Because they don't know any better. So that is the perfect opportunity to start to change the narrative of how this story plays out in 911.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you can help those individual dispatchers in their personal wellness, we make them better dispatchers, then they go to their respective agencies, and before you know it, like, we've made the agency as a whole better now as an organization, because it's comprised of all of the individuals, and the synergy of all of it working together optimizes wellness for everyone. So talk about changing the culture in 911.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it would be wonderful. It is wonderful. And even so, we're giving them these tools for work and work trauma. It's only going to translate to our personal lives. If we can deal with these big incidents that not that everyone doesn't deal with in their personal lives, but the likelihood of you dealing with the same type of trauma that you're hearing for 12 hours a day in your personal life is less. So you're getting tools to help deal with crises that are on a smaller scale in your personal life. You're going to be more successful dealing with those things and being able to balance them out as well.
Right. But I also really love what you said about trying to encourage people to do a lot of introspection and figure out what could be triggering for them.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the analogy of alcohol.
Hey.
Hey. So like stress and trauma is just like alcohol. Like,
Mm-hmm.
different amounts affect different people differently. So like if you and I went out for happy hour right now and threw down a couple of margaritas, what's 2 margaritas for me might be 4 for you, but we're at the same level of inebriation. Right.
Yeah.
Well, how does that come into play? Well, like there's lots of factors that come into play, but it doesn't change the fact that like we're different. And I remember as a dispatcher, calls involving children never impacted me because I'm single, never married. I don't have any children. So those types of calls involving children just didn't have the same impact on me like they did my coworkers who were married at home and had 3 small children at home. Because when they took those calls, what's flashing through their mind? Their own little babies at home. And so the calls that impacted me were different. And they would look at me and wonder, how come a drunk driving call gets you all riled up? Well, I had a family member who was in a collision with a drunk driver. So, right, that personal impact in my life like changes the way that I respond to that stress and trauma, even as a dispatcher.
Definitely. That's one of the big things that one of my coworkers like popped into our academy and told us. He was like, I had no problem with the kid calls until I had kids. Then it hit a little different. And I think just because maybe we've had trauma in our lives, that doesn't mean we can't do this job, but it does mean that we should be mindful of how our own personal traumas, because we all got them, are going to impact how we respond to the situations we're going to be exposed to.
Right, you are. So we're not trying to like disencourage or dissuade people from entering 911 because they've had stuff happen to them in our lives. Right? Hello, welcome to the human species. You're in good company. We've all had stuff happen to us in our lives, but I think it's knowing and recognizing that is going to help you navigate some of the challenges later in your career, because those things inevitably are going to present themselves, because that is the very nature of the job of a 911 dispatcher, answering 911 calls. People usually don't call that phone number when they're having a good day. Most people call that phone number when the world is coming to an end for them.
Yeah.
And so that part of knowing and recognizing is what is going to help make you more resilient in preparing for that when it does happen, and then responding appropriately afterwards.
Exactly. I know there was another story that we heard about in academy where this individual came in and they were a victim of a pretty big crime, and it was well known in the area. They wanted to get into dispatch. They wanted this opportunity to be on the helping end of things, and then after they took a couple calls, they just realized that their what they had with coming in with them was too big for them to be able to do that job. So for that person in that instance, their history prevented them from doing this job. But in the same way, someone could have the same type of trauma and just be really good at connecting with folks who are going through tragedy, So it's not really the thing; it's the person and their level of comfort.
Right.
Because we can be great dispatchers. We are great dispatchers even with our trauma.
Right. And that's what we call in psychology post-traumatic growth. It's using that stress and that trauma you've experienced prior in your life, but using it with a growth mindset to change how it's going to impact you in the future, and how you can use that then to help and aid other people who are experiencing similar circumstances.
Definitely. Man, I think we're
this is deep stuff, right? But I think it's a great conversation, because sometimes even as dispatchers, we still have that everything is all doom and gloom. And it's not. Really, it's not. 911, law enforcement, fire rescue, EMS are wonderful industries to serve in. It's just changing the narrative of that story for you and how it plays out
Mm-hmm.
for however many years you choose to serve in whatever capacity.
Yeah, I mean, there's there's two ways, you can show up to work every day in life, whether it's outside a department. Is you could complain, you bring the room down. There's going to always be something that a department, a comm center, individuals can be doing better. And we can choose to focus on all that negative that does happen in dispatch. Or we can show up willing to support each other, willing to learn, willing to get better, and create a positive environment to dispatch in. Um, I could say, especially being in a room with only one other person, like the energy that person brings matters. You know,
Mm-hmm.
not that I'm requiring them to always be like happy go lucky. Like life happens. That's cool. But I would like a good 65, 75% of an enjoyable experience that when I'm working with someone for 12 hours, because, that's a long night with just me and you in the room, and you're having a bad day because you're having a bad day, or you're burned out and you're over it. And now I'm working with you as my partner, and it's not fun for me. So I think all that
Yeah.
matters.
And that's taking into consideration the things that you cannot control, right? You
Mm-hmm.
can't control all aspects of life because, like you said, sometimes you just got a bad day. But what we can control are the things like the gossiping, the
Mm-hmm.
backstabbing, and the
Yeah.
backbiting between shifts and spreading all that drama,
Yeah.
which then just spreads like a virus in your comm center. And now you work on Tuesdays, and even the two dispatchers on Saturdays, they don't even work with you, but they're miserable because as soon as anybody walks into that room, the feeling is just ominous.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's I'm telling you, it's weird going from bigger to smaller. Those dynamics, they just matter. And I know I've had people message me about a bunch of stuff, but I did have someone message me, and they're like, "What's up with this toxic vibe that comes in dispatch?" And I've been super lucky that I've always had really good trainers, like really positive all around. I've been super lucky, but I know not everyone has had that experience. And I know people have been like, yeah, I was in it and I backed out because my trainer was just so terrible and made me feel so terrible. And I'm thinking about going back and trying another agency because I still want to do this job. I just didn't want to do it with this person because they made me feel bad.
Yeah.
And we got a dispatch shortage. We don't got time for people just not wanting to do this job because someone's mean. Like,
Right. So you're a CTO now, right, Ashley?
I am not. I'm not a CTO yet, but I imagine it's next on the list at my agency.
Okay.
I did a
So
lot of training at my last agency, but never a CTO.
okay.
Post
So then
academy stuff.
what would you tell someone like a new dispatcher who just shared that with you as a story of an example of like, hey, they want to do this, but they experienced a terrible, incident or incidents plural with a trainer they were working at. What kind of advice would you give that person, whether or not to choose to back out, or then if they do, like how to re-enter and reapply and come back?
Well, I think the best advice for anyone who's going to this field is having a clear, like, really setting boundaries with our trainers and our supervising, hierarchy, um, where I'm comfortable to give good feedback. Like,
Mm.
at SAC, we had a really good like mentor program and things of that nature where it's not always you don't always feel comfortable giving your CTO feedback because there's this power dynamic, right? They're writing my DORs, or not that we should ever fear retaliation, but we can understand why people would hesitate to give the person who's giving your feedback as well, because CTOs and people in authority positions, they're not always receptive to feedback. That's just the reality of it. So I would say really having someone else set up already like looped in with you going into your training. We had mentors, mentees that we could text, hey, I had a really rough day, blah blah blah, told me this, da da da. And there was a this is between us type of feedback, unless of course it needed to be reported as something higher and drastic. But that I could just vent to having that person through training who's in it, who gets it, who probably knows that CTO is kind of, in the supportive avenue, I think is very important to get through training, especially when your training probation can be up to 18 months. It can be a very long process. So having different people to connect with, I think gives us the opportunity to be more successful. And those people can find the better way to give that feedback to that CTO without it necessarily impeding on your experience more.
Yes. So that mentoring relationship was like an official program at your prior agency.
Yeah, we had an actual mentor program where it was total volunteer. Dispatchers would volunteer to be a part of it. Whenever a new academy would come in, we would do like a speed dating type of setup, and you'd get to meet them, and then you vote like which one you want as your mentor, and then you get assigned your trainer and your mentor, and then your mentor would check in with you every once in a while. Like it kind of just depended on how you worked it, how much you needed them, how much you wanted involvement, but at least a couple times a month they check in with you. I saw some people would like give their mentee like a little Starbucks card, like you're doing great, just that extra hype you need with such a long training. I mean, by the time I was going through radio training, I was like, I'm over it. I never want to see a radio. I don't want to touch a pedal ever again in my life. 12 hours, day shift radio in Sacramento. I was good, so
yes.
I think having that extra person who's in it, who gets it, who knows the person you're working with is helpful.
I see. That's interesting because I know of other agencies who have like a mentorship program, if you will. And I never experienced anything like that in my career, at least not officially. So the mentoring relationships I experienced were just organic and happened naturally. And those mentoring relationships in public safety, police, fire, EMS, those mentoring relationships are unlike any other industry in America. Because it is such a brotherhood and a sisterhood. Those mentoring relationships are so powerful. And if you think about it, I mean, you're basically doing peer support too. You just don't know it.
Yeah. And then you're already creating that relationship. So if there is an escalation and they have a bad call, and 9 times out of 10 they're going to turn back to that relationship that's already there, and then you can provide them the peer support. You can help them navigate that. I mean, it's just the benefits of having that from the jump, from day one, is phenomenal. I think it really helps people get through training.
Yes, love it.
Awesome.
Talk about this stuff all day.
I know, right? But it's about time for my happy hour. So let's let's just put a bow on it. So obviously, like a lot of my stuff is geared towards folks who are considering the career, thinking about getting into dispatch. What advice would you give someone who is considering this career, and like things they should consider, or something you thought you should know before, you wish you knew before? Any advice you'd give to these guys?
Yep, I would say do a sit-along. So most 911 centers offer public sit-alongs, and that's the opportunity for members of the public to come in and sit and basically shadow a dispatcher and watch that dispatcher work. And so I would strongly encourage someone looking into the profession to contact your local law enforcement or fire rescue agency and inquire about the opportunities they have for you to come in and do a sit-along. And then that gives you firsthand experience of watching a dispatcher. And then you get to sit with that dispatcher for 2-4 hours, like pepper them with questions. And, that is the perfect person to ask all of the questions that you have. And then I love the advice that you actually gave earlier. So most of the training I do is geared towards people who are already serving in 911. But for new people, I think coming in, just like you said, an important part is to really sit down and just know thyself. So know your strengths, know your weaknesses, know what is going to impact you, where you're going to have some type of significant emotional, psychological response to handling some type of traumatic call. Know what that could be for you. And then looking forward, make sure you find an agency that is going to be geared towards equipping you to success. So for some people, that might be a big agency, just nonstop rock and roll 24/7. But for other people, that might be finding a smaller agency. And whether that's doing it on the law enforcement side in 911 or the fire and EMS side in 911, that's another thing to consider because you could choose. So do you want to handle law enforcement related emergencies, or do you feel more comfortable handling like fire and medical related emergencies? Because those are very different types of calls for service, which then obviously bubble up lots of different types of emotions and feelings in dispatchers. So it's kind of knowing what your strengths, weaknesses, and preferences are, and then finding a good match through agencies that you apply to. And then once you apply, like you said, it's being transparent about your expectations as a newly hired dispatcher, because we guarantee you the agency is going to have expectations of you as an employee. So it's okay for you also as the employee to have expectations of your employer. And just be upfront with either your trainer or a supervisor and say, hey, these are some things I know off the top of my head right now going into this with zero experience that I know could be an issue. So help me navigate these challenges when they present themselves so that I can successfully complete training and not fall short.
Yeah, no, so true. It's definitely something I echo as well. Like when I talk about the interview process and panel interview, one of my tips and tricks is don't sleep on the questions. The questions are not only for you to show the department that, hey, I did the research, I know about you. It's also for you to ask them those things that you need to know in order to figure out if it's a good fit for you. Because there's no point in us putting through training, us going through training, us getting all hired and then going, this isn't a good fit for me, when we could have figured that out with just being honest with the questions we're asking. The interview, it is all to see if this is a good fit for you as well. Finding out if what's your guys' mandatory overtime look like, what's your percentages, what's your call volume, what is those things you can ask and they should be able to answer during an interview. And it matters if that is something that matters to you, that you're not going to be wanting to be mandated in all the time from the start of your shift. That's not the right agency for you. And that's okay. And they would rather you pull out then than them waste all this time, money, training for you to pull out after already knowing all those things. So I totally agree. It's a two-way street. Departments are looking for good folks, and we as people looking for jobs are looking for good departments. It's the mutual relationship that we're looking for here.
That's it.
Yeah. All right. How do folks find you? Socials, websites, all that good stuff?
Oh, you can find the 911 Training Institute on LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram just by searching the 911 Training Institute. Or you can visit our website at www.911training.net. And if there's anything that I can do to help you as you start your career, or if you've been a dispatcher for 20 plus years and there's anything I can do to help you, I'm at your service.
He is not lying. I messaged him and he was right on it. He messaged me right back, totally willing to jump on here with me. So I really do appreciate you taking the time to jump on here with me and being willing to share all your wisdom.
Oh, it's my pleasure, Ashley.
All right, I'll be right back with you, okay? All right, everyone. Hope you enjoyed our show today. Again, thank you, Ryan, for taking the time to jump on this segment with me. Such a good conversation. Lots of good tips and tricks and gems for everybody to take home and put in their tool belt. So I really appreciate it. If you are interested in jumping on a show with me, you can go to the raspydispatcher.com, check out the Let's Talk Dispatch link. The link is also in my bio. And you can just jump on there, pick a time that works for you, and I'll send an email and follow up with you. Of course, like, subscribe, follow on Instagram, subscribe on YouTube, all that good stuff. I really appreciate all the support. It's been really fun connecting with everybody on social media, through the DMs, through these videos. And I look forward to the next one. Until next time, stay raspy, everybody.